callar. Ya lo sé, que tu voz me lo dice todo, ya lo sé. Yo fui un bobo, pero dime que me quieres, dime que aún me prefieres, dime que no hay en tu vida alguien que quieras como mí. Dime que aún estás sola, que quieres volver conmigo, que perdonas mis errores y sin rencores. Te quedarás conmigo, te quedarás conmigo. Y pasarán las noches y las mañanas y los aburridos. Te quedarás conmigo, te quedarás conmigo. Dime que no es locura y que estás segura de estar conmigo. Te quedarás conmigo, solo conmigo. Te quedarás conmigo, solo conmigo, solo conmigo. Y en las mañanas, cuando tú te vas, aquí estaré para amarte, amor. Puedes contar conmigo. Puedes tenerme aquí contigo hasta mi último respiro, porque yo sé que tú te quedarás conmigo, y pasarán las noches y las mañanas y los dos unidos. Te quedarás conmigo, te quedarás conmigo. Dime que no es locura y que estás segura de estar conmigo. Te quedarás conmigo, solo conmigo. Te quedarás conmigo, solo conmigo, estar conmigo.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to Watertown Forward's Charter Chat. My name is Emily Damon, and I'm the chair of the steering committee at Watertown Forward. Watertown Forward is a community initiative that seeks to expand the number of voices in the charter review process through a series of events designed to educate, empower, and engage residents. Our charter chats are an opportunity to share your views and ideas about the charter review process. I wanted to begin today by acknowledging the assault on our democracy and the riots that ensued on Wednesday in Washington, D.C. by white supremacists. Though it may not seem surprising, it was a deeply tragic event that has shaken our democratic process. These hateful actions are not new, and they highlight the racial disparities that have always existed in our society, as well as the fragile nature of our democracy. Though it has been a difficult week, I see hope in the work we are doing together, and I'm encouraged by all of you attending this afternoon. Watertown Forward is working toward the goal of bringing others together in civic engagement to help make Watertown the best place it can be for all people. This is not an easy task, and the past 4 years have sown so much divisiveness into our country and our community. Wednesday's insurrection at our nation's capital and the attempted coup on our democracy showed the outcomes of this divisiveness, polarization, and white supremacy. However, Watertown Forward is a local example of the importance of strengthening democracy through education, engagement, and empowerment. It is vital that we continue this difficult task because we have the opportunity to create a more equitable, transparent, and engaged community. So today, we will be spending some time reviewing the CRC's meeting, and then the Education Committee is going to provide an overview of the structure of Watertown's government. We realize that after Tuesday's meeting, there is much to discuss, and while your questions might not all get answered today, we hope there can be room for rich discussion. And what we don't get to today, we can definitely carry these conversations over to the next charter chat. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Larry, who will go over the meeting guidelines and the rest of the agenda for today. Larry?
Thank you, Emily. And thank you for your words about what we all experienced this week and our hopes for the future. There are going to be several times for questions and answers and comments this afternoon so that we can all learn and get engaged with the work of the Charter Review Commission. We invite you to be curious, to ask your questions, to listen to what other people have to say. You'll be muted at the start, and then we'll open it up for further questions and discussions. And we'd ask you when that's open to keep yourself, excuse me, muted if you're not speaking. The chat function will always be open, and we'd also encourage you to use that for anything else that you would like to comment on. And we'll be monitoring the chat and bringing some of your comments and questions into this discussion at a couple appropriate times. Just a word about participation. There is a raised hand function in participants. If you go down to participants at the bottom of your screen and you open it up, you will see a column open up, and at the bottom of that, you'll see a blue hand. You can click on it, your hand will be raised, and then when it's time for questions, we'll take them in order. And after you've had your question or comment, you can click on it again and lower it. If you have any questions about that, we have a couple of technical experts on the call today, so put your question in the chat and we'll make sure that that gets answered. And I think that's it for just opening remarks about how we're going to conduct ourselves today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Councilor Lisa Feltner. She is going to provide a perspective on the Charter Review Committee meeting this week, and then invite some dialogue, questions and comments about what she tells us. So Lisa.
Thank you so much, Larry, and everybody for the introduction. Thanks to everybody who's logged on today. So I'm just going to give a brief summary of the January 5th meeting of the Charter Review Committee, and there'll be time for questions to the group here. And so the Charter Review Committee, which is 16 people, all 9 counselors, is officially appointed by Mark Sedaris, who's the chair of the committee, as well as 6 community members, residents of Watertown. As most of you know, have kicked off the official Charter Review meetings. The agenda, if you've looked at it already, was in actuality switched up a bit, but one of the interesting things that came out of it, other than the other thing I should say, is the new subcommittee of the Charter Review Committee kicked off their work in improving engagement, official engagement, and information outreach from the Charter Review Committee, which is separate from Watertown Forward, of course. So they gave an update. They're just getting started, but they've started adding new content to the town website under the menu of Charter Review Committee, which still needs some work because it's new, but it's good to know that that's getting going. The other thing that was new that came up, which I think is exciting, is the idea of having a preamble to the Watertown Charter, our Constitution. And so again, Mark Sedaris is going to form a subcommittee, as he did for the outreach for Charter Review Commission. He's going to have a subcommittee that's going to work on a potential new preamble for our Charter Review, and that will come from the Charter Review Committee. People will respond to him who are interested in working that. I imagine 3 or 4 people will work on that. And so that was a new item that I think a lot of people are excited about. Maybe not everyone, but it's to give kind of an overall statement of our values and the purpose of our charter. Then I personally was pleasantly surprised because it wasn't people specifically listed, which, very generous of people to give their time. So sometimes these things come together at the last minute, but we did have a panelist of 3, 1 town administrator and 2 mayors. And the consensus seemed to be that people really appreciated this perspective. So Mr. Jamie Helen of Franklin, Mass, who's a town administrator there, gave his perspective, his service there. And then we had the 2 mayors of Salem, Miss Mayor Kim Driscoll of Salem, and Mr. Scott Galvin, who's mayor of Woburn, who's been there quite a while. That, I would say, dominated a lot of our meeting time, and actually went over time considerably. It was very generous of them to give their time, and With a large charter review committee, it's hard to get all the questions answered or even asked of the committee. And so there may have been some frustration on the public, even on the committee, because, it's hard to have long meetings and maintain the focus in this really important issue of the charter review, very serious subject and very involved. But there were a lot of good questions. I would say that I think one of the interesting things was that Mayor Kim Driscoll, because she served as an administrator as well as legal counsel, meaning town attorney for the city of Chelsea, had a insider outsider, appointed and an elected point of view. And I think one of the things that stood out to me and to others, but I'll just from my perspective, was the accountability piece. I think all three of them pointed out checks and balances, some of which are similar to Watertown in terms of, well, a town manager appoints, but the council confirms, that kind of thing. But because, and she said, because, you're elected, ultimately you're accountable to the public directly through elections. I think all three of them felt that 2 or 3 terms is probably the best in terms of minimal amount of time served to get something done. Most elected positions are 2, maybe 4 years. So as much as some people might say, oh, you never have anybody run against you, I think there's a general acknowledgement that people try to, give someone a chance, 2, 3 terms, see what happens, and then they can have a referendum at the ballot box whether they want to keep them. So transparency, accountability, communication, those were kind of the topics that were focused on, and themes that have emerged, if you will, from the public as well as the Charter Review Committee of areas that folks want to discuss and how we can improve that in Watertown. There are a lot of questions, of course, that didn't get answered, but I think that were really good questions in terms of more examples of performance review. How do you evaluate? How might you address if engagement, so more people get interested in running, and so people don't always run unopposed, which we know it's healthy. Even if you feel like, oh, I really like that person, debate's always good, healthy debate for our democracy. Mayor Kim Driscoll, she did say if she had her druthers, she'd probably prefer to be a town administrator, which is interesting. And I could totally understand that. It came out that it seems, we didn't get into a lot of research, but it seems that the pay is higher, the job's probably a little more secure. And when you're elected official and it's only a 2-year term, a decent amount of chunk of time has to be spent on the re-election. There's more pressure to be accountable and engage and communicate, and the public may have more drive, if you will, or influence on the priorities. And it's also can be, hard decision making. So all your decisions are not popular. You may feel like they're best for the town, but politically might not be that acceptable. And so when you have, if you will, a more professionalized position in terms of an appointed town manager, people may feel more secure about that, whether it comes feeling like, well, I don't want decisions to be political, whatever that definition is for you, what that means. So I thought it was personally, and I think others' feedback was that it was a really wonderful panel. As much as we didn't get all our questions asked or addressed, they were all very generous and said that they would even, wanted to be contacted offline. They were open to sharing their thoughts on that. And it was off to start. It was also noted that the plan anyways, for the next upcoming charter review committee to have a panelist, but this time from a council perspective. Because again, whether it's town manager, mayor, council, when you get down to it, you have to get into the details of what your powers actually are and what does that accountability look like, in details when it comes to boards and commissions or other issues. I thought it was interesting, just personally, the other thing that came out was Watertown compared to the other 3 towns anyway. We seem to have, right now, very clear division between appointments and election, including consistency pretty much across our boards and commission. There was some discussion around, well, how do you feel about, appointments versus elected, whether it's planning board or board of assessors or board of health. And again, the nuances there, I think, depends on the type of board. Also depends on, somewhat the people, the qualifications or the connections to the community that the people who serve on the boards in the cities or towns have and how effective they've been. And there was an acknowledgement, of course, there are, depends on the personality, whether it's town administrator or town mayor. But what kind of kept coming up was the accountability piece in terms of mayor, as well as if, certain personalities tend to be mayors in the sense that, you have to like that kind of spotlight and true public life and engagement with the citizenry and residents and other actors in town, in the state, at the State House, where again, as a professional, professional town administrator, or some people say CEO, in running the business of a city or town, you maybe have a little more cover, if you will, political cover, maybe a little more flexibility in your decisions or time schedule. Maybe it's not quite as 24/7 job because of your, having to ideally be available to constituents if you're a good mayor. What else? They even had, even around zoning, I thought it was interesting. Some questions about zoning and if they're elected or appointed. Mostly, I think, because you run into unanticipated problems in terms of if somebody suddenly steps down or they do make a grave error and they're forced to step down or resign, then how do you replace that? I think that's been some of the feeling or discussion in Watertown about the library board of trustees, just given the turnover there. But I'm grateful that in the Watertown charter right now, it could be changed, but we do have clear direction about what happens if a counselor or other elected person steps down early in the term or late in the term. So that I thought that was good. The one thing all 3 of them emphasized was collaboration. In order to get anything done and move the agenda, if you will, is for staff, elected, appointed people to collaborate. Of course, none of them were against robust or dissent or discussions or deliberation. But I think everyone acknowledged nobody really wants to get bogged down or to the point where you procrastinate to just delay for purposes of delay. And again, I think it came out that if you're an elected official, it could be harder to hide, if you will, between intentional delay. So that was another point that came out. And I think, when the question of vision came up again, I think in the chat, there are Q&A afterwards. We're hoping that it seems pretty much sounds like, I don't want to say me personally, we're hoping, but sharing that some of that could be addressed in a preamble, as well as the process for charter reviews, whether it's 5 years or 10 years, but the process, whether all the counselors really should be sitting on the review committee, since it directly affects their power as well. And so that's yet to come up in the committee. So yes, again, we have these broad topics. It's going to take some more time, I believe, but people are doing their diligence to try to dig into transparency, accountability, responsiveness, and I think the one other thing a counselor asked that was maybe new was, how do people feel about a residency requirement, whether it's a town administrator professional professional position. And it came out that pretty much they all felt that it's not super realistic these days. It's a competitive job, and they likened it somewhat to being a superintendent of schools, and just, different reasons, as you might imagine. So I don't get bogged down on that. There's a lot of really great summary meeting notes. I haven't actually looked to see the participants are on the call if we have new people, but on the Watertown Forward website at watertownforward.org, that members are preparing and are really appreciative of that. Not everybody has time to watch the videos, so maybe you can read the summaries faster. The terms of official meeting minutes, those are upcoming. We had a draft from October, which is kind of straightforward in terms of the committee was just getting started, but there were some things missing from the minutes. So we tabled the minutes for now. So those still, my understanding is they won't be posted to the Charter Review Commission town website until they're approved by the committee. I personally don't expect to see drafts, but maybe we'll get there. And I think that's pretty good summary.
Great. Well, thank you, Lisa. There was a lot of information to share, and we appreciate you summarizing it, giving us the highlights, and giving us some things to think about and perhaps ask some questions about. Let me just ask, Councillor Tony Palumba is also a member of Watertown Forward, and we'll be speaking a little later about town government. But Tony, if you had anything that you wanted to highlight or add or comment on before we open it up, why don't you do that?
Well, thank you. I think Lisa did a wonderful job. I really do appreciate her taking the time, and I'm sure the charter recap that Marcy did, people should take a look at it. I think it's going to be on the website. I would say that I found the presentation by the administrator to be a little bit long and a little bit of a ramble for me. And I was more interested in hearing some of the issues from the mayor from Woburn. And that was a little disappointing because I don't think he went into the issues of accountability and accountability and transparency as great as I wish he had. But in general, I think Lisa captured the essence of the meeting. So I don't have anything particular to add.
I was going to add one more thing. I'm sorry that I remembered, is that when Mark and others chose the panelists and who was available, et cetera. But also, I think it's a good question that came out is, not that you didn't choose great panelists, but people want to see, what about the growth over Watertown that's happening that we're expecting, and not just going on number of residents and what our budget is, so that we really, it speaks kind of to the vision, I think, on the charter review, and keeping that in mind, and the perspective of looking at what Watertown's been, where we're at, and where do we think we're going? Where do we want to go?
Yeah, and I think the other part of that was that some of the, I don't know a lot about Salem, but I don't think that Franklin was a good example of, while it had a good population mix, it was close to us. And I know it's hard to find people to meet all the criteria. It just didn't have the population diversity that I think someplace like Watertown has, or as Lisa said, is being confronted with a lot of development coming from to high tech and life science organizations out of Kendall Square. So it's a different kind of fish, maybe to be clear.
Okay, thank you both for that. I see that we have one blue hand up, and that's Rita. So Rita's going to offer her comment and question in just a moment. So I'd ask anybody else who's thinking about something. We have some time for it now, so we'd like to generate some questions and discussion, and you also have the option of putting that in the chat, which we'll take a look at. So Rita, could you, I think you're unmuted now. Do you want to go ahead and
Sure.
question or comment?
Sure. I echo those last sentiments of Tony and Lisa about the town diversity not being equivalent. I really did want to hear from the two mayors a lot more. The guy from Franklin rambled on about people getting divorced, and it was just, he went on too long. Franklin is nothing like Watertown. It's nothing like Watertown 5 years from now. And I really don't like this. Yeah, I didn't like the comments at the end about it's all about budget, because we have a diversity problem here and it's only going to get worse. Whatever is happening in Sleepy Town, Franklin, is not what's going to be happening in Watertown, or is happening here now. Secondly, I like the people on the committee, on the Charter Review Committee, to ask Mark to put in some sort of time restrictions, because the first town councilor got to speak for 15 minutes and no one from the public got to speak. So I'm like, who was that panel for the benefit of, the council or the public? It just felt like they sucked the oxygen out of the room, and the only good question came at the end. I believe it was from Tiffany Rose York, who asked about something that alluded to the diversity problem. So something like putting, a 5-minute per question thing, or doing a zipper effect where you ask one from the council, one from the public, one from the council, one from the public. Because if the effort is to engage, you're not going to engender any engagement that way. You're just not. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita.
Sorry for taking up the time.
It's okay. We'll hear from Merle, and then there's a comment in the chat, I think, from Tiffany, whom you referenced. So we'll do that. We'll hear from Merle, and then we'll take, I think Janice can comment on what Tiffany put in the chat. Oh, I'm sorry, it was Tia's question. Sorry. So Merle, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a larger question. If a citizen group wanted the town charter to establish a new body like a Human Rights Commission or a Community Police Advisory Board, how would that citizen group be most effective?
Okay, so that question, I'll ask Tony or Lisa to respond to that, if that's something you're going to be taking up later, or if that's something that is appropriate now because it's something that the Charter Review Committee could take up. So either of you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You want to go first, Lisa?
Well, sure. I was just going to say it doesn't have to be in the charter, in the sense that the town council can create a committee or by ordinance, or so, it wouldn't have to be a charter review. I guess it's more a question of, what's maybe the best approach to form a committee than your question of how effective it would be. Again, is a separate question in my mind of, depending on who's on it, what their power is, who they report to, et cetera. That's my, what do you think, Tony?
Well, I have a little different take on it, Lisa. I think that we have not wrestled with the question that Meryl asks yet. So I
Right.
can only go, as a charter review committee, we have not wrestled with the question that she asked, which could also be related to what the members of the committee, how do we proceed? So if I personally want to make a change, when is that going to happen? How is it going to happen? Will it be I saying, this is the change I'd like to make? And does the chair do, okay, that's up on the agenda now. I mean, that's in front of everybody. Let's have a discussion, then let's vote. Well, I'm not sure how he's going to do it. And be perfectly honest, we haven't decided. So I'm only basing it on how the council presently runs, which
Right.
is if an issue gets brought to the council, and we want to discuss it and vote on it, then we would do that if we didn't want to send it to committee. Now, the charter review is not in a position to make referrals to the town council.
Right.
Its position is to deal with issues. And now you asked the question of how does a community group bring the question to the council? I'm already thinking about how am I as a member of the committee going to bring concerns to the council, not concerns, recommendations to the council. So to answer your question, Meryl, I would say that you could do it through the town, through the chair, or you could do it through any member of the committee. So that if you felt like there is something you would like to see, then you can write it up, give it to one of the committee members. They can put it forth for discussion. Again, what happens, how much discussion, how long the discussion takes place, who can speak to it, can the public speak to it, can the councilors, the committee members speak to it, and then how is it resolved? That hasn't been decided.
Thank you, Tony. Sounds like
Might I
there's
say, I suggest you do that quickly.
some opportunities
just
here
suggest
to clarify what the process is for resident and input, and also from committee members' input. Tia, you had something you wanted to raise, and then I see Bruce has a hand up as well. So Tia, go ahead. And you're muted, Tia.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
I'm on and off camera because I'm cooking. I figure you don't want a cooking lesson. One comment was that at the end of the charter review meeting, it came up that, we need to look at towns that have the same budget as we do. Lisa referenced that, Rita referenced that, and my wish or recommendation or hope in that is that we look at where the budget's going to be in 10 years. And I've made a request to the council that we take a look at, where was the budget 10 years ago? Where is it now? Let's take a look at some 3, 5, 10-year benchmarks, because as we look at comparative communities, I think often people will say, well, we should look at Cambridge or Somerville, and it gets shot down because they have different budgets than we do. If we have a vision and a set of priorities, there's nothing to say our budget can't be different. And my recommendation or my hope is that the charter looks at this in a way that is looking out, so that we're not planning for a $150 million budget 10 years from now. I hope not with all the development going on. Surely we've got vision, ideas that we can put into that. So that's my only recommendation, which then goes to the question I put in the chat, which is the process, and we can pick that up at whatever point, the process by which the public can actually express viewpoints ahead of key votes. Thank you.
Thank you, Tia.
If I could
Bruce?
just chime on that.
Oh, yeah,
bit.
yeah, sure. Go
So-
ahead, and we'll go to Bruce. Yeah.
I'll just say, and Tia, thank you for your questions, really thoughtful questions. Your question about the timeline that you put in the chat, I'll just answer quickly that right now, as I think November, the timeline shows that the final report and final recommendations are anticipated in June, with council debate and voting from June, July, and August. Now we know that it runs out to November to allow for potential changes, major changes that we public would need to vote on. in November, if you will, of 2021, assuming that we're going to finish this charter review this term. So, and then in terms of what key points can public express their opinions, you know, I feel like we right now are approaching this kind of like any other meeting or issue, in that we just expect the public to, you know, chime in at regular meeting times and be aware. So I really appreciate Watertown Forward's work and everybody to, you know, push for new ways and have more than what we're used to. But we, you know, we are, people by and large are kind of doing the best we can with the staff that we have and changes going on. But we certainly, it's certainly a concern.
Yeah, let me.
Tony, did you want to chime in on that as well?
This is a helpful discussion, because I do think we need to bring to the committee some suggested procedure on how to arrange questions and comments from the public, so that if we do have a series of things that we believe should be voted on or discussed, they put on an agenda. We set that up in such a way that the counselors speak for a little while, that the committee members speak for a little while, then it turns over to the participants who are there, and then come back for some sort of dialogue and possible vote. But these are very good questions about how to proceed.
Okay, thank you. Let's go over to Bruce. Bruce, you've had your hand up, so you want to unmute yourself, please, and go ahead.
Larry, it's not Bruce, it's Elodia. I'm on Bruce's computer.
Okay.
Okay, just so
Okay,
everybody
sorry, I was
knows.
only going by the name on the participant list.
I know, my computer is doing a massive update that is going to take too long. We're both watching, but I'm the person that checked in here to speak. Number one, I see the same problem going on with Watertown Forward as I see with the charter review meetings, is that there's very, very low participation in terms of people coming to these meetings to listen. I think we should have a very quick poll on as many resources as we can. Is anybody in this town watching it on TV? They would not be registered then with the Zoom meeting, but in the Zoom meeting registration, it's 31 here, it's 32 at the charter review. That's pathetic in this town, given everything that's going on. In my opinion, you know, I'm pretty straightforward, as you all know by this time. The other issue is that the public has not been engaged at all in this process. Not one question was allowed by the public at the last meeting. I have been in meetings, Zoom meetings, where there are 200 people in it. I can see every single person that's participating. I can see the entire chat, questions, whatever, and we are still stuck in this archaic system that somehow we're going to be Zoom bombed and we might see a bare breast or a penis or hear a swear word. Let's get over this. Let's really have participation. I find this completely insulting, and it's a joke. So that's the first thing. The diversity issue I really want to address, because people keep throwing this out, but do you know the numbers in Watertown? And you know me, I always go for facts first, and then we should have discussion. But with regard to Watertown's population, and I'm going by the 2019 census numbers, 76% of this town identifies as white alone. Then we have Asians, roughly 10%, Hispanic Latino 9%, African Americans 2%, 3% multiracial. So we can't import people into our town. We can do a better job on so many levels of diversity and I'm not going to get into affordable housing and the things I'm passionate about, because that's not the point of this meeting. 21% of our residents were born in another country, and that includes me. And I think you all know I speak English perfectly well. We have a lot of people that are born in another country. They come here for graduate school. They live in this town because it's cheaper than Cambridge. So we need to kind of get better facts out there about what our community is now and how it may evolve. And I just don't think we have enough of a baseline, and I keep hearing the same peeps about things, but I'm a baseline person. Then we have the discussion. One of the things that really came out to me in the last meeting, of course, with the charter review, was the silos. You might have, some people thought Jamie talked too long. What I was impressed by was number one, he says, everybody has my email address and everybody has my cell phone number. Two, the school system is not separated from town government. It's in the office across from him. I feel our school is siloed in this community, and I think it's unhealthy. And we're going to see that when we see the numbers come up for the rebuilding of the Watertown High School. And I've been talking about this at every meeting, saying, show us the numbers, because we are not going to get 50% from the MSBA. It'll be based on what they feel is relevant in terms of our student population.
Lodi,
I know, I'm just trying to say,
let me
Larry,
just
there's so
interrupt
many
for a moment.
issues.
I know you have a lot of important and passionate things to say. I just want to see if we can, if you can kind of summarize a couple things
I
and
will.
direct
All
it,
right,
you know,
council.
so we can give some other voices.
I
a chance
will.
as well.
This is unbalanced. The process is unbalanced. The idea that 9 councilors are on this committee is not normal. And we only have 6 residents. So at the next meeting, I think you should take a vote about process, and process should open up. Number one, we should see everybody that's in the meeting. We should see all the chat room, and there should be some fairness in terms of who's asking questions. And when 3 or 4 people got to ask 3 to 4 to 5 questions, and the public, the residents that elect you, were left out completely, is completely bogus. That's my summary, Larry.
Okay, thank you, Lodia. So several people have raised the issue about the process, including, I think, the 2 counselors we've heard from, have raised the question about the process of the CRC itself to ensure that voices are heard and there's some helpful, good way to use time and make sure people can contribute. I wonder if the 2 of you or anybody else here who's on the Charter Review Committee could speak to what is the means by which the committee takes a look at itself and its own process and perhaps makes some improvements.
Well, again, my first reaction, can you guys hear me? I think I'm not on mute, is perhaps this is, well, it's separate from outreach subcommittee, you know. I agree it should be brought up. A couple of people tried to bring it up at the very first meeting. I think, you know, we're proceeding ahead based on, we know what we do, how we do is all we know best to do, given all the limitations. But I think it's a very valid point and an important point, because, you know, we got started late, and I potentially see us bumping up to another term as well. So I would say, in terms of how do we, you know, how does this come up, it's just got to come up during a committee meeting.
Okay.
And
so this is something that any member of the Charter Review Committee can bring up during or maybe even before the next meeting.
As well as people, you know, like Elodia, yourself, others, emailing their requests, if you will, to the committee. Because I think I am concerned that, and Mark did acknowledge that it's frustrating in Zoom, but even if we were there in person, to really get public input and a chance to weigh in, to think that they would just do it in person at a meeting, I don't think is adequate for a charter review.
Okay. And Tony, did you want to add anything to that? And then, I don't know, Vinny, I think your hand may have been up and then went down. So
just very quickly, I think a counselor can take it on his or herself to decide to prepare something with some concrete recommendations and submit it to Mark ahead of time or at the meeting. But it would take an initiative. You know, if you were just to say, okay, let's have a discussion of process. And I've heard from some residents that they're not having an opportunity to talk. People are concerned about how do they get something in front of the commission or the committee. You could say that and then have a discussion, but that uses up a lot of time. The best way to do it is to come up with an identification of issues and suggested solutions to address those issues and bring those to Mark as a way to move forward.
You're saying bring those to Mark outside of the specific Charter Review Committee meeting itself, but more in the time when the meeting is being planned.
With the request, yes, with the request that it be brought up on the agenda, yes.
Okay. Is there any other comment from anyone about this? We're going to be moving on to first look at Watertown town government in a couple minutes, but wanted to afford anybody a chance to make a comment, ask a question, if you have one now. And Janice, is there anything else that's coming up in the chat that you want to call attention to?
No direct questions. There's some really nice conversation happening, and I would encourage anybody who would like to make a final comment or ask any other questions about what you're discussing. Feel free, no pressure at all, because I think all of these issues are really important, but I know our time is limited.
Okay.
I think, sorry, Larry.
Yes.
I didn't know that Tia's questions was answered in terms of, are we hearing correctly that June and July stuff will be brought to then be voted on by the council by November? Like, can we just clarify what the actual rule of the dates? Because I think she had asked if she was correct.
Let's get the response to that, and then Louise, you had a hand up as well. So the timeline and what's going to actually happen in terms of voting.
Well, yeah. So the timeline we were given is a chart. If I could put it in the chat, yeah, if I could, I can't because it would take too much memory, et cetera. But it might be on the Watertown Forward website. I know it's on our town website, but one of the things that I had asked from the committee was to flush out the chart, working with the Collins Center and having more detail about each of the tasks, what's involved, who, at least a description, and who's in charge or responsible for the task. But the chart right now does show that in terms of editing, drafting, et cetera, it says work on draft report and recommendations, March, April, May. The final report and final recommendations come forward or are presented in June, assuming from the committee. Then we expect a town council debate and vote June, July, or August, because you need time to prepare for, if there were major changes you need to vote on to prepare a ballot for November 2021. Now, Mark has said we're flexible. This is the general timeline, but I have already heard people kind of pointing to this timeline as a done deal. So it concerns me. I think we need more information, and I appreciate people asking the questions, because if there were major changes, the anticipation about the public hearing about any major changes would be August up to November vote.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Lisa. And there looks like more information available online and maybe some flexibility around exactly what happens when. Let's take one more comment or question that was from Louise, and then we're going to transition over to our next topic. Louise?
Yes, thank you. I don't know if I'm supposed to make comments in these meetings because I'm part of Watertown Forward, but I just want to say the thing that struck me the most from the three speakers was the degree to which it seemed they're all extremely, extremely engaged with the public. Strikingly, I have lived in Watertown for 34 years. I think maybe I've caught 2 seconds worth of Mike Driscoll. So, you can have something on paper, but it also has to do with the person you've hired, I imagine, in terms of their leadership, their willingness to collaborate with people. There's something about our town council and our town manager that feels very closed. I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you, Louise. And thank you to everyone who presented information and shared your perspectives, asked your questions. That's part of what we're trying to do here in Watertown Forward, is to create an opportunity for people to do that. So thank you all. We want to shift gears a little bit now, but this obviously is an important continuation of our discussion into Watertown Forward, Watertown Government, a first look. I'm going to hand it over to Vanna, who is going to introduce this section, get us started.
Hey, everyone. Can you hear me clearly? Yeah, cool. So we're going to take a first look at Watertown government. But before we do that, there's a few questions which, it might seem repetitive. We wanted to gauge kind of what everyone knew about the town government. And after this conversation, maybe this will be a little bit repetitive, but Emily, if you want to throw those out, just 3 very general questions for you to answer. How much do you know about your town government? Is Watertown a city or a town? And how many departments report directly to the town manager? And you folks might know a bit more than like the general, not apolitical public, but. Then we get those results, we will continue. And then Tony, do you want to share the presentation right now, or should I do that?
Well, let's, can we just take a minute to look at those results and
Sure.
see what we're saying about our knowledge of town government?
Yeah.
I'm just going to give like 15, 20 more seconds so people have a chance to think about it.
Okay.
Still waiting on a few people, so.
I feel like we should have asked harder questions.
Okay, so we're still missing a few people, but so we have time. I just want to make sure that we have time to keep going. So looks like we got the majority of people on the call, and I'll end the poll and then share it with everyone here.
Great. A little and quite a bit. Wow, that's great. Kind of expected. Is it a city or a town? Yes, we are a city. We'll call it a town because we like that. Here we go. How many departments report directly to the town manager? This is a good one. 3 to 7, 8 to 11, 12 to 14, and 15 to 18. The most popular answer was 8 to 11. Stay tuned for the correct answer, which will be revealed in the presentation and might shock you. So Tony, if you want to put up the presentation, I can do it as well. Perfect. So Watertown Town Government, a first look, presented by the Education Committee. Yep, so we're going to do just the agenda, a quick glimpse of Watertown, demographic comparisons over time, the type of government we have, town council and manager, and then some more specifics if we have time for it or there's interest for it. Next slide. So our population is around 35,954 people. A good chunk of that is people who are registered voters. School enrollment is 2,678. We're about 4 square miles big, pretty small. And our residential tax rate is $12.14. Commercial tax rate is $22.53. And our annual budget for FY21 is approximately $152 million, which is the largest budget, I'm pretty sure, as far as I understand, that has been passed. Next slide. So this is the total budget for governmental spending, not the total budget for everything, which was my mistake for, flipping onto this. But from FY 2014, which is on the furthest right, it's a little bit confusing because it's flipped, to FY20 on the furthest left, we've kind of gently increased. And I think that follows suit with the regular budget or the total budget, which from what I understand has been increasing from about like 100 million to what we have now, the 150 million. So now I'll hand it over to Louise for the next slide on demographics.
Hi, so this is just one piece of data. There's so many aspects of the demographics that we could share with you, and hopefully we will at some point. And I think the issue about knowing more about where our town has been and where it is now will help us to inform where it is going. This speaks just to the diversity issue, and Elodia stole my thunder. She read the statistics before I got a chance to do so. But just to say again, the green is 1990 from the census, And the orange is from 2016, which is from something called the American Community Survey, which is done by the Census Bureau on the off years, has a different method of collecting data, of course, and it's more of an estimate. But this shows that in terms of people who identify as white only, there has been a decrease of about 11%. In terms of the African-American population, that seemed to double between 1990 and 2016. I do think it's been going down again, but I'd have to get some actual data about that. The Asian population has about tripled, and the Hispanic population has risen quite a bit. So this is, again, just one piece of data, but it does show some direction in which the racial and ethnic directions of the population. That's it for demographics.
I think it's my turn. Is that right?
That's right.
I just wanted to say something about the nice figures that that Vanna put in around the budget. Just as since I was on the commission in 2010, our budget was around $91 million, and here it is, 2020. The budget at that time, 2020, is $145 million. So that's a big increase in 10 years. And as it says in the data, the fiscal year 21, which is the year we're in right now, is 152.4. So I do want to make two preliminary remarks. One is that this is a work in progress. This is an effort to give an overview of how town government is structured. And it is an overview of that, and that we will continue to add and take away things that we feel from feedback from you and others are working. We're hoping to use this outline to talk to community groups and other groups in the community in Watertown, to get them more aware of how Watertown's government is structured. And the second thing is there's a difference between what the government looks like and how governance takes place. And you can infer from this presentation some things about accountability and about transparency. But there's also things that you need to talk about in more detail in terms of how it actually takes place. Governance actually happens, to talk about transparency and accountability. But you can draw from this presentation some thoughts about those two important, and communication and engagement too. You can draw from this. So our town is a city. It is a city, and you will hear this often, the city of Watertown, known as the town of Watertown, but it is a city, and it's a city because we have a manager form of government. Even though we like to be called a town, there's also another form of government that makes it a city, which is the mayor council form of government. And then you have representative town boards, a meeting with a board of select people, or an open town meeting with a board of select people. Those are towns as opposed to cities. Next slide. Can I do this? Oh, you're doing it. This is an excellent organizational chart. We will come back to it, but it just basically puts up the elected body, the voters, then the elected, we'll go through these three elected bodies down to the town manager, and the number of people who report to him. We have an assistant town manager and an auditor who's also an assistant town manager. And then over here is the list of committees, commissions, and boards, which we'll go through quickly later. Next. So town councilors, we have 4 at-large councilors. We have 4 district councilors. The town council president the 4 district councilors are elected only by the people who live in their district. The 4 at-large councilors are elected by everybody in the town, as is the town council president. who also sits on the school committee. He is elected by everybody in town. The town president's salary is $100,000 annually, $10,000 annually. Councilors are $7,500 annually. We pay 20% of our health benefits. Often the 20% roughly equals some of the amount of a monthly salary amount. Next. What do? We are the legislative branch. What's the town council is the legislative branch of government accountable to the voters. We pass the town budget. We pass orders, ordinances, and resolutions. Approval of all tax dollars spent by the town. Approve all the tax dollars spent by the town. We hire and evaluate the town manager, the auditor, and the town council clerk. Those are the three positions that we actually hire and evaluate: the town manager, the auditor, and the town council clerk. We approve all recommendations of the town manager of all the various volunteer boards, commissions, and committees. Next. We make our own rules. We do have every 2 years they are reviewed, but these are rules that except that is other provided by general law or by the chapter. We have rules of how to operate as a body. There are 11 committees and subcommittees of the town council. 3 members of each three members of the council sit on each committee: a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary. They're all appointed by the town council president, and all subcommittee meetings are open to the public. And here is a list of the 11 committees that we have. And they all begin with the Committee on Public Safety, the Committee on Public Works. They begin with the word committee. Next. We meet twice a month on the second and fourth Tuesday of the month. In August and December, we only meet once on the second Tuesday of the month. The town council president can call additional meetings at any time during the year. The town council president chairs the town council meetings and determines what can be and what cannot be on the agenda. And the town council the president can also add to create ad hoc or temporary committees. For example, there was at one point an ad hoc committee on transportation and 2 temporary committees that have been recently established with the school building committee and the charter review committee. Next. Who is the town manager? Our town manager is Mike Driscoll. He's considered the executive branch of town government, appointed by the town council for an indefinite term of office, and does not need to be a resident of Watertown, though our present town council, town manager is a resident of Watertown. The town manager appoints, supervises, and can remove all department heads, negotiates union contracts, recommends all members of town boards, commissions, and committees. Is basically the chief executive officer responsible for the proper administration of all town affairs. The powers and duties are extensive and are laid out in the charter in section 2-3. There's quite a list of responsibilities that he has. Next. Next. As I say, his major responsibility is the town budget, which is presented to the council in the preliminary form and in the final form. He publishes an annual report that provides an overview of the operation of town departments, commissions, and committees. There is no performance review for this position, nor has this is I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I think this is correct. I'm not sure where this came from. I apologize. The town council is responsible for reviewing the town manager's performance. We do an evaluation every year. We're supposed to do one every year. Sometimes it doesn't get done every year, and it is a public process, and people can read how each counselor rates the town manager, and then there's a composite of all our ratings. Next. Oh, the school committee. Very quickly, the school committee, 7 members at large, all voted for voters throughout the town. The 7th is the elected president of the town council. The terms of unlike our terms, with the council terms, which are only every 2 years, The term of the 6 elected school committee members is 4 years, but they're staggered terms, or 3 members up at election every 2 years. The school committee elects the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary, and the president of the school committee is elected by its members. They meet on the first Monday of each month, and on the side is our list of the chair, the vice chair. I apologize here. There's no president of the school committee. There's a chair of the school committee, but they're all elected. The school committee elects their own people, the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary. Next. Their responsibility is the hiring the superintendent, as well as approving the superintendent's hire of the assistant superintendent and the business office director. They determine the policy directives to be administered by the superintendent. They negotiate contracts, collective bargaining contracts, make reasonable rules and recommendations for the school system. They set the salaries of the school department. The powers and superintendent, the powers and duties are outlined in section 4-1 of the charter. The school committee has 6 subcommittees, and they're listed there. There are 3 members on each subcommittee, with 1 member serving as the chair. They are paid an annual salary of $4,500. They also have access to our health benefits, where they pay $20 and the town pays $80. A detailed explanation of the school committee, how it operates, can be found in the school policy manual, which would be here if you were clicking on it. Next. Library trustees. These are also, this is the 3rd and last body of elected officials in Watertown. As I say, there's 3 elected bodies: the school committee, the town council, and the library trustees. Here, the library trustees are all, again, like the school committee, all voted by all the members, all the voters in Watertown. So that sets off the town council, where you have 4 voted by all members of all residents and 4 voted by districts. This is, library has 4-year terms, but they, like the school committee, do staggered terms. Unlike the town council, we have 2-year terms. What happened? Oh, there we go. Can you go back just one, please? The trustees are not compensated. The library trustees are not compensated and are not eligible for benefits. They do elect, the members elect the chair, the vice chair, the treasurer, and the secretary. Okay. The powers and duties are found in the charter, including the selection of the library director and his or her salary within a range, however, set by the town manager. And they establish policies and procedures to be administered by the director. The director of the library has extensive powers, including hiring, firing, setting salaries, defining duties, etc., for all employees. And their duties can be outlined in you can see their bylaws, which follows similar to our town council rules of operation. They have bylaws. And next is our committees and commissions, I think. So there are 21 boards or commissions and committees or commissions and committees in town. Some have been active for many years. Others are only a year or 2 old. Some of the members who are on the so at one time were elected. For example, the board, the zoning board, and the planning board at one point were elected. Now they are appointed. And some are established and or must abide by state law. Members are all volunteers, not elected, and receive no compensation. However, some of these entities do have on their boards and commissions town employees. For example, the Traffic Commission is made up of 4 town employees plus 2 residents, just as an example. The town manager makes the recommendations for each position, and the town council approves and recommends. There are no term limits. One could do a presentation. I could do a presentation on each of these, explaining their mission, their membership, and the powers and duties. Some are very extensive, like the planning board and the zoning board of appeals. And here we only provide quickly in the next two slides, the length of term and the number of members. So an oldest one is the Bicycle Ped Committee, Board of Assessors, the Board of Health. A new committee is the Community Preservation Committee, which has been about 2 years now, which came about because we passed the Community Preservation Act. Interesting, the Election Commission has 4 members, 2 have to be Republicans and 2 have to be Democrats. Next slide. The environmental, and this is a very good committee. It's been around for a while. Has 8 members. 1 of them is employee. And then you see the planning board, 5 members, 3-year terms. The school committee, the school building committee. This is a temporary one that was elected to help through the process of redoing our 2 elementary schools, building 2 new elementary schools, renovating 1 and building our high school. And I think that should wrap it up. And I turn this over I turn it over to where is she? I don't see her.
I think it's me, Tony. Felicia, yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Felicia Sullivan. I'm also on the education committee. So I am this slide here just provides you all with some other factors that come into play. So, there's a city or town requirements that are created through the process, but there are other things that may play out that impact what you can and cannot do from a town level. So just going through those on the slide, for example, the Constitution, obviously that's the rules over everything, First Amendment, Equal Protection Clause, etc. Next is federal law. If there's a conflict with if there's a conflict with a city or town and a federal law, the federal law will prevail, although there's always areas that are gray. Then there's state statute. So if there's a Massachusetts general law on the books, the city or town cannot create a rule that conflicts with that state statute. There's also some regulations where the state agencies are the ones who have the authority over a certain area, and the regulations are issued by that state agency. The city or town cannot override those regulations. There's also case law that exists out there, which is just anytime there is a decision that's made by a court, by a judge in either state or federal court, then those will sometimes overrule things that a city or a town may want to do. And then another area is collective bargaining agreements. So those collective bargaining agreements are negotiated with the town and specific groups such as a police department or employees in the town. And so anything that's negotiated in that agreement will those impact what you can and cannot do on a town level as well. So that's just a principle, a set of an outline of the principles of conflict of laws. It's illegal. It's just a legal term and it's complicated, but that's just something that plays into what you can and cannot do throughout the process. And that's the end of our presentation. Now we would ask if anybody has any questions at this point.
Thank you to members of the Ed Committee of Watertown Forward and everybody who helped put this together. Very informative, helpful. I learned a lot of new things, so I'm sure we all learned something. So thank you for that. And now again, let's open it up to your questions, your comments. And I think, Vani, you're going to be looking at the chat to see if there's anything that you want to bring into our discussion.
Sure.
That's already been commented on. So let me just check to see if there are any hands up. Anybody have a hand up who wants to ask a question or offer a comment? And it looks like Megan, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Just a super basic question about something that Tony had mentioned in the presentation. When you were going through the boards, commissions, and committee member numbers, I was just curious what you meant by employee. You said some of them are members and some of them are employees. What do you mean by that?
What I meant was not some of them have employees on the committee in addition to volunteers. So the example I was giving you was the Traffic Commission, which has the police chief, the fire chief, the head of DPW, and the head of community development and planning. And it also has 2 residents on it. So there's not many like that, but that is an example where the committee is made up of volunteers, but has some members of the administration on it.
And the committee pays for those people?
The committee pays?
Yeah, no.
No, those employees are paid through the town.
Okay.
None of the committee, none of the residents who sit on these boards are paid.
Okay.
I would just note that our town engineer also now sits on the traffic commission. That was an addition that town council made several years ago, which I think is really great. And to Tony's point, most of them, when we refer to employees on the boards and commissions, serve as staff liaison, if you will. So for example, a planner is part of the bike ped committee, but they're not a voting member of the bike ped committee. As Tony mentioned, it's the volunteer residents who are appointed and really dedicated doing this work, but nobody is paid for that.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Okay, any other questions? I'm looking at the raised hands and don't see any at the moment. So Vanna, are there some things that came up in the chat that would be worth letting everybody hear about, maybe sparking some additional conversation?
I think earlier on, Rita had a question that was define the licensing board during Tony's presentation. I'm not sure.
Yeah, what do they license?
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
You're muted, Tony. If you...
Too, but I know that they do the liquor licenses, the one-day liquor licenses and the regular other licenses. Lisa, there's a number of other things they license, but off the top of my head, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Part of it was cut off. I was just going to say the licensing board is pretty fascinating, actually. Most people don't go to those meetings unless it's, let's say you need a license to have liquor or alcohol, wine at, the Greek festival in East Watertown, or a group wants to do something like that. And so the part of the purpose of that is you get public safety concerns addressed. Are police going to be there? You have to have a license for having alcohol for the new movie theater that was going to be Arsenal Yards. Restaurant licenses operating, and so sometimes get, opinions from Board of Health. So
I just thought it was funny because they have partisan members. Like, of all the boards, they're the only ones besides the election commission. So I'm like, what are they licensing if you have one Democrat, one Republican, and 2 people from different parties?
You mean it's noted whether they're registered? Yeah, I think part of this, the town manager tries to have a balance of representation in the boards.
Thank you. Vanna, anything else coming up in the chat that you want to call attention to?
I think maybe we can maybe quickly expand on collective bargaining, unless whoever asked that question, I think it is Nancy, unless the answers in the chat have sufficiently answered your question.
Okay. All right. Chuck Dickinson, is that? No, that's not your hand up. Sorry. That was my cursor in your square. So thank you, everyone. We had a very rich discussion today. Just looking over my own notes here, and a really good update about the Charter Review Committee itself, and a number of comments about trying to improve that process, to open it up, give people a chance to have their voice be heard, what the timeline is like, what's going to happen over what period of time. So lots of discussion and engagement around that. And then the Ed Committee and Tony sharing all of your good information about what's going on in Watertown government, a first look. More to come on that. In fact, in a minute, we're going to ask you what you might like to hear more about in that regard. So it's 4:20. What we wanted to do in the next couple minutes is give everybody on the call a chance to give us some feedback about how this went today for you. Emily is going to put up a poll, which will give you an opportunity to give us provide a rating for today. And then we'd also ask you if you would put anything in the chat that would either help us with what's good we should keep doing, some things maybe that should be improved in how we do these chats. And also, if there are some additional topics that you'd like to talk about more or hear more about, we'd very much appreciate that as well. Then Emily will just do a couple quick things to wrap it up. So here's the poll. We'll leave that open for a couple more seconds and then see what we got. Emily, do we have most everybody's feedback?
Yeah, give it about 5 more seconds. So if you're still thinking, feel free to answer that poll. And I'll close it out and share the results.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for that. And again, please, before we end up today, put any written comments in the chat, which we very much appreciate. And then Emily, do you want to share the final slide?
Yeah. All right. Perfect. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your feedback and hope that at our next charter chat meeting on Sunday, January 24th, that we can have even more rich discussion. Just a few upcoming events. The next Charter Review Committee meeting will be on Tuesday, January 19th at 6 p.m. And then the following Sunday, the 24th at 3 p.m. will be our next charter chat. If you have any questions for us, please contact us at forwardwatertown@gmail.com. And you can also visit our webpage at watertownforward.org to see recordings of this and other charter chats, as well as get some resources from some PDFs that we've put together on Charter Chat FAQs. I know that Marcy just finished up her recap from the last Charter Review Committee meeting, which is a very detailed review of what happened in that meeting, though I know we went over it today. If you're still interested, I would go to our website for that. So thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.